Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about the Big Ten as a whole. We obviously have the big one up there in State College. Oregon goes up to Penn State for a huge top 6 matchup. We got another top 25 matchup, USC, Illinois, and a couple others including Ohio State. Maybe on upset alert over there in Seattle against the Huskies, but let's go ahead and get into the SEC because we got some huge games there as well, including one that could very well be the game of the year the way that was very much last year, at least in my opinion, was the game of the year last year. That is Alabama-Georgia. Number 17 Alabama goes on the road to number 5 Georgia. Obviously, both these teams coming off a bye week. Alabama with a week 1 loss to Florida State. Georgia able to get a massive win in crazy fashion over Tennessee a couple of weeks ago. But Georgia is favored by 3.5 in this game, over under at 52.5. Another night game. So make sure you got 2 TVs going because you're going to have Penn State, Oregon on one. You're going to have Alabama, Georgia on the other. And I think they're both going to deliver in a big time way. But I don't think I need to introduce this game too much. I think people understand what's on the line in this game kind of the same way we were talking about the Oregon-Penn State game. Everyone gets it. Kirby Smart has not been able to beat Alabama. He has very much struggled against this football team. Alabama has been able to, even when they're not playing good football, find a way to beat Georgia, and it has been a huge thing for the Georgia fan base. It is going to carry into this weekend because Kirby Smart 1-6 against Alabama as the UGA head coach. Georgia's won 33 straight games at home, so kind of working against each other there. And Alabama under Kalen DeBoer 2-4 on the road. And one other great stat that came over from Jonathan Williams over on the Film Guy Network. If you are not watching the Film Guy Network, please do. It is a really, really good resource if you just want to learn more about football like myself. But at the end of the day, dropped a great stat on Twitter earlier this week. Since 2017, so around when Kirby Smart was getting his feet comfortable as the Georgia head coach, Georgia defenses, when they've allowed 30 or more points, they've allowed it 13 times throughout that time. In the next game, following those 30-point performances from their defense, they have not lost. Kirby Smart has not lost a game. I got to get this full stat up. I apologize for this. Since 2017, the Georgia defense has given up 30 points 13 times during that time. In their next games, the opponents are scoring an average of 17.3 points per game. Kirby Smart is 11-2 in those games, and they have held them under 20 points in 9 of those 13 games. So dominance from the Georgia defense after they kind of get exposed. It happened last year with Alabama where they didn't play good football, and then they're able to turn around and play great football going forward, and it's just kind of the way this defense works. Kirby Smart always finds a way to get things done. He actually hasn't lost a game after this defense has given up 30 points since 2018 in the Sugar Bowl against Texas, where they lost to Sam Ehlinger, and the infamous "We are Texas is back" type of thing came really on the scene. But at the end of the day, this is a very good football coach. This is a football coach that puts themselves in great positions, especially after they have a struggling performance on defense. They bounce back in a big way is the best way to put that. Sorry, that got a little bit of a diatribe, but at the end of the day, a very, very interesting stat heading into this one. A couple of players to watch as you look into this game. Neither of these offensive lines are playing all that well, which means Quay Rousseau and Christian Miller are the guys to watch. Quay Rousseau, the edge rusher for Alabama. Christian Miller, the defensive tackle for Georgia. If you can slow down the Alabama run game in this game for Georgia, you're going to have a very, very fun time. And you're going to be able to put a lot of pressure on Ty Simpson and maybe be able to close up some of those passing lanes on the back end because the Alabama offensive line hasn't been able to get the run game going. Probably going to need it in this matchup. And then on the other side, the Georgia tackles have really struggled, particularly on the right side of that offensive line with some different injuries and stuff. Quay Rousseau can totally blow up this game, and Gunnar Stockton has been able to handle pressure, handled it incredibly against Tennessee. This might be a little bit different with the athletes they have on the outside for Alabama. The wide receivers versus the secondaries on both sides of the ball, as far as I'm concerned, are the matchups to watch in this football game because the Alabama DB group is incredibly talented. This is going to be their toughest challenge. Now, the Florida State one was plenty, and they didn't necessarily play their best football in that one. But you got Zachariah Branch, Colby Young, Noah Thomas, Dylan Bell. I'm trying to London Humphreys, obviously. A number of guys on the other side for Georgia that you're going to have to handle with guys like Keon Saab and Bray Hubbard and Zabian Brown that made the great play last year to kind of seal this victory for Alabama. And then on the other side, obviously, you got Jeremy Bernard and Ryan Williams and Isaiah Horton and all of those guys that are nightmares to guard. against a DB group that really struggled against Tennessee. And it's one of those things that what can you do as if you're Georgia if you get Ryan Williams in one-on-one coverage? Do you ever try to get Ryan Williams in one-on-one coverage? Because if you play a safety over top of Ryan Williams, Jeremy Bernard can hurt you just as well. So it is going to be a battle back and forth. I can absolutely promise you that. It is a very, very interesting group because I think the Alabama DB group is a little bit more capable. I also think this is going to be by far the toughest challenge they've had thus far, and I do think it's going to be a moment where they're going to have to up their game as well, and then obviously the Georgia secondary has to play a whole lot better than they played against Tennessee to get this job done. But the keys to the game for me, which O-line can step up the biggest, because we talked about it. Really haven't lit the world on fire through 3 games for either of these offensive lines. Frankly, I thought the Alabama offensive line was going to be the very best in the country this year, and they very well still could be, but Caden Proctor's not playing his best football by any means. The interior is good, but not great as of right now. They're still figuring out that right tackle position. There's a lot of moving parts with this team right now, and if Georgia can get after them, then you're having a very interesting conversation. The other side, same exact thing. You know, if Gunnar Stockton can't get comfortable, can't have time to throw those deep balls that did so well against Tennessee, then you're going to have a really long day on your hands. And you're going to have an Alabama defense that can just fly downhill and make all types of plays on you. And then you're going to be fighting from uphill pretty much the entire afternoon. Then Gunnar Stockton's legs, I think, are huge in this game, kind of because of what we just talked about with that offensive line. You need kind of an equalizer, and that's what he is. He's his ability to get out of the pocket and just make positives. It doesn't have to be a 20 or 40-yard run down the field. Just got to be 5 yards on 2nd and 7 or 4 yards on 1st and 10, just to give them more manageable downs going forward and put them in great positions, because he is a guy that it's probably not going to light the stat sheet up with his legs, but can make so many big-time plays and can keep a defense on their heels, in an Alabama defense that wants to be in attack mode as much as possible. And then this is Ty Simpson's chance. This is a very, very big game for Ty Simpson, as big as it is for Kirby Smart and Georgia fans and getting over the Alabama hump. Ty Simpson's been waiting for this one. He's been waiting in the wings for 3 years at this point for this game, because he understands how much it means to everyone. He understands that Alabama usually wins this game, and if they don't, a lot of blame is going to be put on him. But at the end of the day, he's going into Sanford Stadium at night. He's got to be perfect, and he's been perfect over the last couple of weeks. He's been as good as any quarterback in the entire country. He's got to step up to the plate, because this is going to be a lot on his shoulders. He played plenty good against Florida State, but at the end of the day, he's probably going to have to play a little bit better in this one. I went back and forth, and I fought myself a lot. I thought about just doing the prove it to me, Georgia, that you can beat Alabama. I just don't see, I see Georgia winning this football game. When I really get down into the nuts and bolts, I think Georgia's going to be able to hit guys over the top with the wide receivers they have. I think they're going to be able to get after Ty Simpson quite a bit and force a couple of mistakes. And I think that crowd's going to make a difference, especially at night. I've been in that stadium. I understand I have UGA over my shoulder here, which doesn't necessarily help my case too much. But at the end of the day, that is a very, very special atmosphere at night. I think they're going to be able to get this one done. I think this is the moment where they get over the Alabama hump. I don't think this might not be the last time you see Alabama this year, so this not necessarily fully over the hump, but at the very least get a win that they very badly need at home at night. I think Georgia gets it done. Moving forward to another huge one in the SEC, number 4 LSU at number 13 Ole Miss. Ole Miss actually favored in this one by 1.5. It's bounced kind of all over the place throughout the week, but over under at 54.5. It's a 3:30 kick to get out of the way of the big one that's going on at night. It's a massive one, and it's one that Ole Miss probably looks back on and thinking, if we just make one more play in that football game, we're in the CFP. Frankly, you can say that about 3 different football games that Ole Miss played last year, but at the end of the day, this one was huge, and it's a huge rivalry going forward, and we'll talk about how it's still on the docket going forward as we get into the next era of college football in the SEC, but at the end of the day, it's a really, really fun matchup. The quarterback situation for really both sides, for different reasons, has been really interesting to watch. We'll talk about that in a second, but the matchup to watch to me is very simple. It's Lane Kiffin against Blake Baker. Blake Baker wants to play on his front foot. He wants his defense to be flying around, to be creating havoc, to be always moving downhill. Lane Kiffin is elite at keeping teams on their heels, whether that's in the run game or in the pass game or in the combination of those two. He does such a good job of making teams just guess for half a second too long. And it's the difference between a 2-yard run and a 40-yard run in the Lane Kiffin offense is a huge matchup between these two guys. Blake Baker has been able to play on his front foot because they got a struggling Clemson offense. They got a couple of teams that they should have been able to beat. They got a struggling Florida offense. This is not a struggling offense. This is one that you're going to have to be able to play on your front foot, play aggressive, play your game, but also understand that you're going to have to be a little bit more patient in this football game and then be able to attack at the right moments. It's going to be a huge matchup between these two play callers. The keys to the game, the quarterback dichotomy in this one is very weird. Obviously, first of all, with Ole Miss, I don't know who's going to start. I tend to believe it's going to be Trinidad Chambliss, not only because I tend to believe he's a little bit healthier, I tend to believe he's a little bit better as of right now, but also I think he's a better matchup for LSU. Now, you could argue that the quick passing game could have a huge effect in this game, and maybe they want Austin Simmons for that, so we'll find that out when they kick off. I think it's going to be Trinidad Chambliss. I tend to believe he's going to be the guy the rest of the way, if I had to imagine. But on the other side, how healthy is Garrett Nussmeier? He has been a little bit gimpy early on in the season. They had a abdominal injury, I believe, was the story out of LSU. I don't know what he's going to look like in this game. I know for a fact he's going to have to make big-time throws, and he's done that at times. You know, even in the Clemson game, he made some massive throws in that football game. They only had 17 points. He played some really good football. So even as an injured quarterback, he can play really well. The Ole Miss offensive line is going to know that, or defensive line is going to know that. They're going to absolutely come after him start to finish in this football game. How healthy is he, and can he make the big-time plays that he's been more than capable of making throughout his career? The LSU offensive line's massive in this football game. This is one of those teams that obviously had to redo a lot of that offensive line with both tackles, including Will Campbell walking out the door. I believe 4 starters actually walking out the door from this football team, and they filled it with good players. They filled it with players that are absolutely passable, that will give you a chance in just about every game, but this is going to be a big-time step up. They did well against Florida, not great against Florida, and this is probably right around that realm, especially on the edges. They can really get after your quarterback, and if you let Ole Miss's defense get their feet in the ground and get forward, it's going to be really hard to stop that group. And then finally, who leads early? Both these teams are momentum teams on kind of both sides of the ball, but particularly offensively for Ole Miss and defensively for LSU, they are momentum teams. If Ole Miss's offense can get moving early and Lane Kiffin gets a groove and Trinidad Chambliss gets a groove, it's going to be really hard to stop this football team, especially at home. If the LSU defense gets their teeth in early and gets a couple of sacks and has maybe a pick early in this game, it's going to be really hard to slow down that group, because Harold Perkins, Whit Weeks, and all of those guys playing with their hair on fire is downright terrifying. I can be totally honest. So it's going to be really awesome to watch what happens. I tend to believe who's leading after the first quarter is in a really good shape to win this football game. And there's obviously been some interesting things happening off the field. I don't necessarily feel the need to address all of that, but at the end of the day, been a very interesting time for the Kiffin family as well as Whit Weeks during this game and the lead up, but I think Ole Miss gets it done. I just think Ole Miss at home with that quarterback that is leading the way at such a high level, with an offensive line, specifically an offensive line for LSU that is not playing great football right now, I think Ole Miss gets this one done. I think they're able to get a massive win at home, and they become the team in the SEC that's joining Georgia at the very top, and maybe the team that finds a way to get to the SEC championship, or they're meeting Alabama after Alabama gets a big-time win. So a huge week in the SEC, and it doesn't stop there. Auburn goes on the road to number 9 Texas A&M. It's been a really rough week for Auburn, hadn't it? They lose a game, obviously, in Norman in a game that they very well should have won if it was officiated correctly, but that's, again, beside the point in the past. Let's keep moving forward. Texas A&M favored by 6.5 in this game. Having to go on the road after what Auburn just had to endure is incredibly tough. That being said, Texas A&M has allowed teams to run on them early in the season. That Notre Dame game, there were a couple of moments where they were able to get loose and make some big-time plays. Jeremiah Cobb is a very good running back for this Auburn team, and obviously Jackson Arnold can make plays with his legs. The other part of that is this Texas A&M defensive line saw what they saw last week against Oklahoma. They understand that Jackson Arnold likes to hold on to the ball just a little bit too long in some of these scenarios. They're going to be coming after him every single play for pretty much start to finish in this football game. If I had to imagine, they're going to force him to make plays, and he's going to have to step up in a very, very tough environment. I think it's going to be a really fun one. I think they're going to get up and down just a little bit. The Auburn defensive line is a really interesting group to watch here because you stop that Texas A&M run game, you have a lot of things rolling for you. Now, obviously, with Mario Craver and Casey Concepcion and all the guys they have hitting 70-yard touchdowns essentially every play, it feels like it's going to be a lot harder than that. But I do think the Auburn defensive line brings a ton to this to the table in this game. I think it's going to be kind of a short game. I think it's going to be running the football, a couple of possessions here and there. At the end of the day, I think A&M makes one big play. I think they're able to make one massive play. Maybe they're up 24-20 late in this football game, and then Casey Concepcion goes 70 yards for a touchdown. Everyone goes crazy in Kyle Field, and the game's essentially over. I really do think that game last week in Norman was a turning point for this Auburn season because it's not going to get easier from a schedule perspective, and the more that you lose these games that you feel like you probably should win, the more it gets tough to show up for the next one. So I think Texas A&M is going to be able to win this one. It won't be all that comfortable throughout this game, but I think they're able to stretch it late and get a big-time win. Tennessee on the road at Mississippi State, number 15 Tennessee at this point. Tennessee favored by a touchdown and a hook here. Over-under at 62.5, as you can imagine, with these two high-flying offenses. This one's going to be really fun, and it's going to be a really interesting game because you could have 6 different 50-yard touchdown passes in this football game. They are going to throw the ball deep downfield, and you look at Tennessee last week, or a couple of weeks ago, against Georgia. There's an opening there, especially when you have speed like Anthony Anderson and Brennan Thompson on your offense. Brennan Thompson's probably the fastest guy in the entire SEC, maybe the entire country. If you look at his track times, he is out of this world fast, and they're not going to have Jermod McCoy in this game. It doesn't sound like they're going to have Ricky Gibson, but that's something that we'll probably find out a little bit later in the week. I'll update on Friday. It is an opening. There's no two ways about that. The other part of that is the way that Arizona State was able to get points on Mississippi State was in the run game, not in the pass game. So Tennessee is going to have to lean on that run just a little bit more. I think they're capable of doing that, but again, no David Sanders Jr. in this football game. Maybe that's a little bit of an opening where you can't quite get the run game that you want to get going in. You're going up against the 11th best pass defense in the entire country in Mississippi State. Maybe there's a little bit of an opening for Mississippi State to get a couple of takeaways and then turn around and hit a 50-yard touchdown, and this thing totally turns on its head with the Cowboys going crazy. So I think this one's going to be close at half. I think Mississippi State's going to come out of the gate, hit a couple of big plays, and we're going to be thinking, oh my God, Tennessee's going to find a way to lose, drop to 2-2, and this whole season's going to go down the drain. And then Tennessee's able to find a way to come back in the second half. I just think they're too good of a football team. I do think that run game is very capable, just hasn't had to really kind of sink their teeth in yet. So I do think they're going to be more than fine. They win this one 34-24. I do think it's a little bit sketchy at halftime, and a lot of people are looking that direction, but Tennessee's able to win this one, continue to move forward, and Mississippi State still a lot on the table for this football team, but at the end of the day, you take a little bit of a step back as you start SEC play. It's an incredible week in the SEC. I think it's as impactful of a week as you're going to find around the country in a specific conference, because Tennessee, if they fall out of this thing, they're probably out of SEC contention and maybe CFP contention. If Auburn's able to beat A&M, what does that look like going forward? That is an absolute logjam. If Ole Miss is able to beat LSU, that totally changes the dynamic around this thing. And then I don't think I have to tell you about what happened if Alabama was able to beat Georgia. It would be all over the place. In Athens, Georgia, and the other way around, it would be a Georgia's going to win the national title by 1,000,000 type talk after that one. So it'll be really, really fun to watch all of that unfold. We got more games. We got more big games that we haven't had a chance to get to because we haven't touched the ACC. We haven't touched the Big 12. We will do that right after this, so stick with us.